we're just imagine for a moment, every time you enter a surah, you're entering into one of Allah's palaces. A surah from Allah is a gift sent from above the seven heavens to humanity, and you're entering something that the world did not have access to it. This came from way, way above. And it came as a gift to humanity. Tanzilun min Rabbil Alameen. We will take a deep look at Surah Al-Jumu'ah, as deep as I can do at least. And there's still endless oceans left after whatever I'm able to do. But whatever I try to do, I will try to simplify as much as possible. That's how humanity was sent down. There's a mindset that's taught in these ayat. The Quran is not just information, it's a mindset. What is priority? So when Allah says, whatever is in the skies and whatever is in the earth declares the perfection of Allah, is there a special stress on the earth? You understand? So you'll find in most of these surahs, wherever tasbih is mentioned, there's a special stress on the earth. And what's really cool is Allah will mention that special stress on the earth, and immediately in the next ayah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man istanna bi sunnatihi ila yawmiddin. اللهم اجعلنا منهم ومن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر آمين يا رب العالمين. I'd like to first express to you how excited I am and how happy I am to see so many of you, and I know that many of you have driven long distances to come and attend this program. Inshallah ta'ala, I pray to Allah that He counts all of this as ibadah for Him, and that He includes us among that hadith that was mentioned by the Imam, خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. The best of you are the ones who learn the Quran and then teach it. So what I'm going to start with is an introduction, just so you all have an idea how these lectures are going to go, how these discussions are going to go, and what the plan is for them. For this entire week, if those of you that are committed to coming the entire week with me, we're going to be studying Surah Al-Jumu'ah. So we're going to be just studying one surah of the Quran, and it's only 11 ayat. It's not long at all. So it's only 11 ayat, but it's going to take us a whole week to study that surah. Somebody asked me on the way here, actually a volunteer asked me on the way here, are you going to be like very high level, or are you going to talk to the rest of us? So I need to address that question. My job is to try to study the Quran as deeply as I can. And address some of the hardest questions I can address in my own investigation with my team, with other researchers and scholars. And then that's the easy part of my job. The hard part of my job is to learn all of whatever I can learn and then to simplify it so that human beings can understand it. Because scholars and students, they speak some kind of alien language that the rest of us don't understand. So I need to make sure that I explain things to you in a way that makes sense to you, that you can grasp. Some concepts are difficult, they're more complicated, but I'm going to do my best to keep things as simple as possible. So there's two different things. One, you want to talk about complicated things, but two, you want to talk about them in simple language, right? And you have to have that balance, because sometimes people just talk about simple things. That's not healthy, because life is complicated. There are some complicated things we need to talk about. And then what happens is when people have more knowledge, then they start using more complicated language to talk about that, university professor language, and then nobody understands. And then those discussions remain in certain circles in the society, and everybody else doesn't get it. And this is actually the problem that I felt myself, and I feel that pain for you. So what I try to do, inshallah, in these lectures is, yes, we will take a deep look at Surah Al-Jumu'ah, as deep as I can do at least. And there's still endless oceans left after whatever I'm able to do. But whatever I try to do, I will try to simplify as much as possible. Now, having said that, I'm going to speak to you for about 40 minutes, 45 minutes at a time. The moment I see some of you traveling into the spiritual world, Some of you do this in very creative ways. Some of you look like you're just really concentrating on the material, like, Other people fight it. They fight it by agreeing with me a lot. Like, even if I'm not saying anything, they're like slowly declining. I've seen the brothers do this a lot. Like, they'll be sitting in the masjid floor. They're sitting, first they're sitting like this, then they're sitting like this, then they're sitting like this. And eventually, So, but 40 minutes at a time, then I'm going to give you guys a break. I know there's lots of sisters, lots of brothers here. So what I'm going to try to do in those breaks, the breaks will be 5 to 7 minutes long. I believe Maghrib is around 9:20. So we have about 2 hours before Maghrib. Tomorrow onwards, I'll start exactly at 7 o'clock because I want to make the most of the time we have. So maybe 5 to 10 minute break. In those breaks, you can come up to me or I can go in that middle area so I can hear from both brothers and sisters. We can have some conversations, take whatever questions. The breaks are dedicated for questions and discussions and comments. Those are the most valuable. Pictures can wait. I'm here a whole week. We'll figure out a system and we'll do all the pictures you need to do. No problem. I have no problem with it. But in the breaks, I'd rather just focus on conversations. This is what I'm going to do, but now let me tell you what I expect from you. This week, I want you to use your imagination. If you walked into a historical palace, right? An ancient palace. When you walk in, people walk in with their cameras, right? And they're making video of every door and every decoration and the ceiling and the windows and all that stuff, right? Or the artwork on the wall or the calligraphy and things like that, right? So tourists are just, wow, this is amazing, that kind of thing, right? Because this represents the work of a great king of the past. Just imagine for a moment, every time you enter a surah, you're entering into one of Allah's palaces. A surah from Allah is a gift sent from above the 7 heavens to humanity, and you're entering something that the world did not have access to it. This came from way, way above, and it came as a gift to humanity. Tanzilun min Rabbil Alameen. What happens in the Quran, if you've even read the Quran in translation, you will know the Quran has a lot of repetition. Right? The Quran talks about Judgment Day, and then it talks again about Judgment Day, and again about Judgment Day. The Quran talks about one prophet, like Musa alayhi salam, then it'll talk about him again, and again, and again, and again, right? So there are many subjects in the Quran that keep repeating. And what happens to you and me is when we look at that and we say, oh, I already know that part. Oh, I already read that before. I've seen that before. Show me something new. Where's the cool stuff? Where's the new stuff? Because we're always into something new, right? And now because of TikTok and Instagram and all this other stuff and YouTube Reels, now we're addicted to something new. You can't, if you're watching one clip, then you see an older clip, already seen this. You get annoyed if you see something you've already seen. So we become addicted to newer forms of entertainment. But the way I want you to think about this, the way I describe this to my students is every surah is like a palace designed by Allah. And there's another palace designed by Allah. And they may have similar bricks or they may have similar windows. But does that make them the same palace? No. Are the doors being used exactly in the same way? Is the flow exactly the same? Is the exterior and the interior exactly the same? No, every bit of art has its own unique identity, doesn't it? Think of an easier example nowadays. Forget about architecture. Think about cars, right? There's one manufacturer, clearly, a couple of big manufacturers in this town, right? And they have lots of different models. And those models have a lot in common, don't they? But each model has its own unique identity too, doesn't it? It has its own features, its unique, exterior, interior, the mechanics, the technology. There's some variation all the time. What I want you to think about when you study the Quran is you're not trying to study the entire Quran. Just give yourself to one surah. Really give yourself to one surah. And this surah is super short. It's like not even 2 pages. It's really, really short. So what I want you to do this week is just the whole week, read this surah over and over again. Just before this lecture, after this lecture, just read the surah and ask yourself, what is Allah saying here? What does He want from me here? What does this mean? Ask whatever questions come to your mind, start documenting your questions about this surah. The questions I want to discuss with you in this week, I'll take some of your other questions too, but I don't want to hear your, don't worry about the questions about nail polish or halal meat from McDonald's or just, those questions will be there before this program and those questions will be there after this program. But you know what? Let's surrender our questions to the Quran for a week. I'm calling it Quran Week because I want this to be a week of just Quran for you. You just immerse yourself completely into it. Now, we're going to start talking about Surah Al-Jumu'ah because we are short on time. These slides are not there to make your life easy at all. They are there to make my life easy. Okay, so this is you getting, how when you use an app, it's easy to follow, but you don't see the programming code behind it. I'm showing you some of the code. Not all of the code, some of the code. But that's for me to navigate so you get some idea. Even if you take these pictures, you're not going to use them in you're never going to look at them again. But that's okay. But I'm still going to walk you. This helps me organize my thoughts and everything I want to share with you. Some of these things you can take a picture of, you might benefit from. But most of the time it is complicated. So don't trust the slides. You know those professors that put a slide on the screen and everybody's focused on the slide and nobody's listening to the professor? That's what I don't want happening. This is for me as my aid. What will help you is my explanation. That's what's going to help you. So don't turn this into a distraction for yourself. Regardless, in my study of the Quran, I've come to believe that the surahs of the Quran are in groups. They are in groups. So, there's 114 surahs in the Quran, right? And you'll see, for example, Surah Al-Baqarah. What's after Surah Al-Baqarah, people? Ali Imran. What's after Ali Imran? Nisa. And what's after Nisa? Ma'idah. So Baqarah, Ali Imran, Nisa, and Ma'idah are 4 very large surahs. All 4 of them were given to the Prophet ﷺ when he was in Medina. So they're very large and they're all from Medina and they're all together. So those 4 surahs are a what? They're a group. And when you study them carefully, you will see there's very deep connections between the 4 surahs. They are together for a reason. When you go further in the Quran, you look at Surah Al-An'am and Surah Al-A'raf, 2 very large Meccan surahs. So there were 4 Madani surahs and then 2 what? Meccan. Meccan surah means the Prophet got them when he was in Mecca, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Those 2 surahs are very, very large. Meccan surahs are usually not that large. There are some relatively, but these are the largest ones. And these 2 are together and they're very closely related to each other. They become a group, just a group of 2. And then you see 2 very large Madani surahs again, Anfal and Tawbah. And they're also deeply connected to each other. So what that does is you're studying a surah, but you also have to figure out what neighborhood does it belong to? Which group does it belong to? Which other surah complements it? And what group of surahs came before? And how is the conversation proceeding? In every book, many of you are university students or university graduated. In any book, in any subject, there is a logic to the sequence. Right? There's a logic. If you can't understand what the logic is to the sequence, you can't understand the book. You can't make sense of it. But a lot of times in our study of the Quran, we think that this order of the Quran is just something that the Muslims decided to agree on, but this is actually not the real order of the Quran as intended by Allah. I strongly disagree with that philosophy. I believe Allah Himself said, Kitabun uhkimat ayatuhu, a book in which its ayat were stitched together. Stitched together. When you stitch something, every stitch is perfectly placed or no? Every stitch is exactly where it's supposed to be. And the fact that even Allah called it kitab. Kitab doesn't mean speech. Kitab means what? Book. And book is not a Word document. A book is not a Google Doc. A book, back in the day, is something that was carved or scratched. When you carve something or write something or scratch something, can you change the order anymore? No. So if Allah is calling the entire Quran a kitab, this actually, among many other evidences, the book was intended to be in this order from Allah. From Allah. Just like when you say Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, there's an order, right? And you cannot change that order. You cannot say Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim first, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen second. You can't do that. There's a set order. The same way there's an order within the ayat of the Quran, there's an order to the entire Quran. And when you observe that order, you learn a lot. So we're going to go into every ayah of the surah, but first I want you to know what neighborhood does it belong to, right? And this is right next to another group of surahs. So I'm going to start there. This is surah number, by the way, anybody know the surah number? Very good, 62. The group before this one is 50 to 56. Qaf to Waqi'ah. That's the previous group. And that group is all Makki surahs. When I say Makki surahs, what do I mean? Surahs given to the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca, right? In the early period, the first 13 years. Those surahs have a lot of commonalities. I've already covered a series of those surahs. And in those surahs, one of the things you learn is Allah is constantly warning those who don't believe. He's warning people who don't believe in the afterlife. He's warning people who don't believe in the Quran. He's giving them warning. So the people in Mecca who don't believe are the target audience, and particularly the wealthiest among them. So actually, it's also a mistake to think, oh, the Quran was attacking everybody in Mecca, or was criticizing all these Meccan mushrikeen. It wasn't like that. Actually, the Quran, when it attacked, or when it was aggressive with the elite of Mecca, the elite politicians, the multimillionaires, etc., who were using their money and their influence to attack Islam. Those were the ones it was coming after. They're called al-mutrafin, they're called matta'na bihi azwaja minhum. Different phrases are used in the Quran to describe that group of people, and Allah goes after them directly. And you will study, if you study Quran carefully, especially Meccan Quran, you will find Allah He keeps highlighting, have you seen the one who has this much money and he doesn't give? Have you seen the one who wastes his money like this? Have you seen the one who spends to make sure that people don't listen to the Quran, etc.? They say this, they say this. It's not everybody who's saying this. There's a group of people that have a lot of power and a lot of money, and they're using that power and influence and money to attack the mission of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Quran is responding to them. The huge population of Makkah, many of them, they're just quietly watching what's happening. They're not on this side or that side, they're just spectators, you understand? And that's actually what happened when Islam won. Then many of them came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, what is this? Like, is this a new? I see that you guys broke all the idols. What's going on? Is there a party? And then the Quran said, إِنَّ أَحَدٌ مِّنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ اسْتَجَارَكَ فَأَجِرْهُ. If one of the mushrikeen comes to you, one of the idol worshippers comes to you and says they want your protection, give them your protection until they hear the speech of Allah. Because they didn't know. Some of them didn't even know. We read the 23 years of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, from Revelation, and we think everybody knew what was happening. No, some people were at home playing on their PlayStation. They had no idea what's happening outside. And they finally got out to do the groceries and they're like, what is this? And the world had changed. So Allah says, ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ قَوْمٌ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. That's because these people had no idea. Give them their space. The same way, just the same way that the Quran criticizes these mushrikeen, this group, 62, Surah Al-Jumu'ah, starts with Surah number 57, Surah Al-Hadid, and it ends with Surah number 66. So 57 to 66. These are 10 surahs, and they're all Madani. What does that mean? Given to him in Medina. These are short Madani surahs, one after the other, starting from 57 all the way to 66. Okay? And one of the things you will notice inside these surahs is that it is warning not the disbelievers, it's actually warning the believers. It's warning the believers. And I want you to understand why that happens. When the Prophet ﷺ started his mission in Mecca, everybody believed. Everybody who believed in him was completely sincere, is what I meant to say. Everybody who believed in him was losing their family, they were losing money, they were getting beat up only for believing in him. You get nothing from believing in the Prophet. You get nothing from it. You get beat up, you get insulted, you get attacked, you get kicked out of your home. That's what you get if you're in Mecca and you believe in the Prophet. Because everybody, the elites, they call the Prophet ﷺ insane. So if you join him, you are also what? You're also insane. And they say that he's not loyal to his people. And so now you're not loyal to your people. So basically in the tribe, in tribal life, if you're not loyal to your people, you lose your citizenship. That's your citizenship. So if you join the Prophet, in a sense, you've lost your citizenship. We're not going to do business with you. We're not going to marry with you. We're not going to sit and eat food with you. We're going to boycott you. These are the kinds of things the Sahaba had to face when the Prophet ﷺ was in Makkah. So you know what that is? The only reason you will believe is because you are getting something greater than all of these problems. It's called return on investment, right? It's return on investment. If I'm going to lose my friends, I'm going to lose my family, I'm going to lose my money, I'm going to lose my house, what am I going to get? Why am I signing up for this? And I'm going to get beat up, and I'm going to get humiliated and insulted. Well, you get Iman, and Allah will reward you in the next life. And you get to be loyal to the Prophet. So the final messenger of God is here, and he's standing for the truth, and you have the honor of standing next to him. That's all you get. Good enough for you? Yeah, good enough for me. It's an honor. They're getting beat up, and they're happy they're getting beat up. They're getting spit on, and they're happy they're getting spit on. These are the people, we call them as-sabiqun al-awwalun. The people who came first. The people who came first. I'm going to take a few minutes to explain this to you because this is a really important concept. When someone comes first to something, then they lose friends and family. If you come from a family where everybody's a doctor and you decide, I'm going to sell bicycles, you're the first one. So I'm going to start a bicycle store. I'm going to have the most successful bicycle business in Europe. Your father will write you out of your will. Your mother will contact as many psychiatrists as possible, right? They'll even contact a local imam. Maybe he can recite some Quran and on you. Because you're doing something that nobody else in the family is doing. You understand? So when you break away and you do something else, then everybody turns against you. What kind of support do you have when you do something like that? Do you have anybody to support you? No. You have to have the strongest kind of personal will that you're going to do this, even if everybody thinks you're crazy. And some of these people, like one little boy says, I'm going to be a footballer. I'm going to win the World Cup. And we're like, yeah. And then that kid turns into an actual football player who eventually ends up winning the World Cup. And then they tell his story and say, when did this begin? Well, this began when I was a child. You know, and there are other boys that say, I want to be a footballer. I want to win the World Cup. And their dad says, that's cute. Do your math homework. That's cute. Sign up for college. Get this job. So the dream starts getting crushed, doesn't it? But some people, they don't care what anybody says. They fight everybody and they go after their dream. And they even get there. 0.0001% of people. Whatever that small percentage is. The point is, if you do something new, you lose everyone around you. The Sahaba, by believing in the Prophet ﷺ, were doing something new. Yes or no? Are doing something new. Nobody did that in their family. Nobody did that in the tribe. Nobody's done that for thousands of years. What are you talking about? Are you crazy? You know? And because they did that, they are the first comers. These are, these people, you know what we call them nowadays? We call them pioneers. In American English, we call them trailblazers. They set a new trend. They do something nobody's ever done before. And when they do that, eventually, they become heroes in society. Whether they're in business or in sports or anything, when they do something new, everybody's like, wow, this person did something so crazy and so new that nobody had even thought of. And they start pioneering something and it takes over. And then there's a next wave of people, we call them fans or followers. In the beginning, that guy is alone or that woman's alone. But once they reach success, what happens? Lots and lots of people follow them. So they become trendsetters. In the beginning, they're crazy. Eventually, they're the one to follow. They're role models. The Prophet ﷺ, by the time he gets to Medina, the Sahaba are already there. His loyal followers are already there. And now, even in Medina, some people are early to follow the Prophet ﷺ. And even in Medina, people are like, should we? Really? You think he's a prophet? Of God? You think an angel talks to him? That's what you think. Huh. And so it would be difficult. There are people in Medina that have Jewish background. They could say to their family, well, your book isn't good enough for you? Moses isn't good enough for you? The Torah isn't good enough for you? Your rabbi gives such a great sermon every week? That's not good enough for you? Why are you becoming Muslim? What's the matter with you? There could be Christian background. There could be other background. And they're starting to accept Islam and all their families losing it. But as it starts growing, and by the time the Prophet gets to Medina, actually a huge population of people living in Medina are ready to accept Islam. It's no longer sacrifice. Now the people who follow Islam are not the minority. In a sense, they are the powerful majority. So the world is very different in Medina than it was in Mecca. Now the Muslims are the winning team. They're the winning team. Because they are the winning team, you then get 3 kinds of Muslims. This is really important to understand this group of surahs. You get how many? 3 kinds of Muslims. You only got 1 kind of Muslim in Mecca. Which kind? The pioneers. The ones who are ready to sacrifice everything. That's the only kind of Muslim you get in Mecca. When the Prophet ﷺ moves to Medina, you get the pioneers. And the pioneers are from Mecca, and some of them are also from Medina. As-sabiquna al-awwaluna min al-muhajirina wal-ansar. The first and foremost who came from the Muhajirin, and the first and foremost from the Ansar, meaning the people of Medina. That's group 1. Then there's group 2. They accept Islam because it makes sense, because it's a beautiful message, but they don't have to give up their family, they don't have to give up their job, they don't have to give up their home, meaning they accept Islam intellectually, they accept Islam emotionally, but it comes without any sacrifices. It's not a major sacrifice. By comparison, the pioneers, did they have to make major sacrifices? Yeah. So this is accepting Islam easier now in Medina? Yeah. So a good number of people start coming into Islam, and it's easy. Sometimes an entire family accepts Islam. The whole family becomes Muslim. Easier and easier and easier. Then there's the third group of people. The third group of people says, we were doing pretty good before he got here. People used to listen to us. People used to follow us. Now all of a sudden, everybody wants to become Muslim. If we want to stay relevant, if we want to be a part of the society, then we have to join the winning party. We need to accept this Islam, because if we don't accept Islam, everybody else is going to follow the trend. We're going to be left behind. Now they're not following Islam. They're not coming to Islam because they are interested in Islam or they find it convincing, but they think it's a good political move. It's a good social move to accept Islam. You understand? The Quran calls these people munafiqun, hypocrites. That's what he calls them. You get 3 kinds of Muslims in Medina. Let me ask you what they are. What's the first one? The pioneers. Then the average Muslims. I will call them the average Muslims. And the third one? The munafiqun. But there's a problem with the average Muslims. Let me tell you something. What happens with the average Muslims? The average Muslims came in with or without sacrifice? Without sacrifice. Generally, without too much sacrifice. But pretty soon in Medina, after a little bit of time, is there going to be a need for sacrifice? Yeah, because Makkah is not sitting still. The Makkans are not happy about what happened. And within 6 months, there's going to be preparation for war. Which means anybody who accepted Islam is potentially a member of the military. I just like the prayers. I thought it was really nice. The Fatiha sounds so nice. I just accepted Islam for so beautiful and spiritual. What is this? Fighting? Fighting? I don't know how to fight. I'm a farmer. I don't know how to fight. The only fight I ever have was with my wife. I don't have any other fight. What do you mean? We're going to Badr? We're going to go to Badr? And the people who came for political reasons, remember the munafiqun? They come to the regular Muslims and they say, see what you signed up for? You see what happens? You missed the days of the past or what? And the munafiqun are trying to pull the average Muslim towards their team to also make them into what? Munafiqun. So there's actually munafiqun are two categories. There are two categories. Now, let's understand this picture again. Because there are three groups, I want you to use the analogy of if you have a lot of iman, it's high temperature. If you are basically Muslim, middle temperature. And if you have no iman or you're a hypocrite, it's cold temperature. In Makkah, was the average temperature high, middle, or low? It was high. But in Medina, is the overall temperature going down? Yeah, so I'm not talking about one person, but overall as a community, is the average iman, the overall iman, decreasing? It is, isn't it? To address this problem, the overall iman is decreasing. Muslims needed to be given a wake-up call. Don't fall into being munafiq. Don't let your iman die. You need to increase the temperature, not decrease the temperature. The goal of these 10 surahs is to shake up the Muslims to increase the temperature. That's what's going on in these 10 surahs. Surah Al-Jumu'ah is one of those 10 surahs. Okay? And that's the overall picture. I want you to understand the overall picture and the agenda of these surahs, and that's what that is. Is that clear to everybody? Okay? Now, let's go on. I'll skip some of this. Some things you should know. These are some subtle things. In the previous group, let's see if anybody remembers which surah number to which surah number was the previous group. 50 to 56. This is Qaf to Waqi'ah. Allah talked in every surah, He said something or the other about the Quran. He said something in every one of them. He started with Qaf wal Quran al-Majid. Qaf, I swear by the majestic Quran. وَذَكِّرْ بِالْقُرْآنِ مَنْ يَخَافُ وَعِيدٍ. Remind with the Quran whoever fears my threat. Remind through the Quran whoever fears my threat. That's in Surah Qaf, number 50. In 51, He says, فَوَرَبِّ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ إِنَّهُ لَحَقٌّ إِنَّهُ لَحَقٌّ مِثْلَ مَا أَنَّكُمْ تَنْطِقُونَ. I swear by the Master of the sky and the earth, it is, meaning the Quran is the truth, as true as your ability to speak. Though He's convincing people of the truth of the Quran. Then He says, فَذَكِّرْ فَمَا أَنْتَ بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ بِكَاهِدٍ وَلَا مَجْنُونَ. In 52, He says, remind people, because you are not a mind reader and you're not insane like they say. أَمْ يَقُولُونَ شَاعِرٌ. Are they saying he's making poetry? He's a poet. يَتَرَبَّصُ بِهِ رَيْبَ الْمَنُونَ. Let's see how the situation changes. Maybe somebody will come and kill him. Maybe his poetry will go out of fashion. It won't be viral anymore. Let's just see how things, let's wait and see. Don't just believe in him yet. Let's wait and see. أَمْ يَقُولُونَ تَقَوَّلَهُ. Are they saying he just makes it up? بَلْ لَا يُقِنُونَ. No, they're not ready to be convinced. فَلْيَأْتُوا بِحَدِيثٍ مِثْلِهِ إِنْ كَانُوا صَادِقِينَ. Let them bring something even close to it if they're telling the truth. What is that a challenge of? Produce something like what? The Quran. Here's all the allegations. This is what you think the Quran is. Okay, well, if it's poetry, give me your poetry. If it's magic, show me some magic. In Surah number 53, He says, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. He's not making this up from His own feelings. He doesn't speak from His own feelings, His own emotions. إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. This is nothing but revelation that's being given to Him. in Surah, the next Surah after Qamar, or after Najm, Qamar, Allah says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We made the Quran easy for people to get reminder. We made it easy for them to remember Allah. Then is there anyone who wants to benefit from that reminder? You know the famous words about the Quran in Surah Al-Rahman already, Surah number 55. Ar-Rahmanu allama al-Quran. The most loving, the most caring one. He's the one who taught the Quran. Why do you not realize this is an act of love from Allah? And then at the very end of this, in Surah number 56, really interesting, فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ وَإِنَّهُ لَقَسَمٌ لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عَظِيمٌ إِنَّهُ لَقُرْآنٌ كَرِيمٌ. I swear by how the stars are placed in the galaxies, and that is an amazing oath. This is a noble Quran. This Quran. Allah compares the Quran's ayat to the stars in the galaxies, right? Which is a deep discussion, but for another time. I've already done the series on Al-Waqi'ah. But I will tell you this much. Allah says about the Quran in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, the last surah before this group begins. He says something special. He says, أَفَبِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَنْتُمْ مُدْهِنُونَ. You want to play games and negotiate with this book, with this speech? You want to do a negotiation? We like this part, we don't like this part? This is what you want to do? وَتَجْعَلُونَ رِزْقَكُمْ أَنَّكُمْ تُكَذِّبُونَ. And you think that you can just keep your provisions, your rizq. Meaning, the real reason you want to play games with the Quran, with this revelation, is because you don't want to lose out on your money or your assets or your social power. So you want to take the parts of the Quran that allow you to keep your current assets and your business and your politics and your social standing exactly how it is, and everything that challenges that, you want to put that aside. That's the negotiation you want to do. This was important because in the coming surahs, the group we're dealing with, Allah will talk a lot about the hypocrites. Now,